No more cursing.
Yeah. Mics are on. Another couple minutes.
It got weirdly quiet. Still a few minutes before the meeting starts. Everybody can talk still.
Let's throw out a topic, and then they can talk amongst
That's right,
themselves,
yeah.
right? Isn't that protocol?
So you're running the show, I forgot Jan was out.
Maybe y'all help me.
Yeah. We have some nice instructions here too.
Yeah. Yes, we like these instructions.
Oh, good.
The cheat sheet is,
We set
Yeah.
the standards really high apparently.
I
I
guess
shouldn't
so.
say cheat sheets.
I told him we're
It's starting
the
point.
next
It
one.
is a cheat sheet. I'm dying to use the gavel.
That's the best part of the job.
I was gonna say, what a perk.
Kara's gonna go to your head.
Judge Karen show.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't tell my husband, cause
We'll keep you humble.
yeah. Ask for one for my birthday.
You get those on Amazon.
Wonder if they have patterns, like Vera Bradley patterns.
Yeah, like a nice handle.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Everybody's really quiet. Too serious.
Well behaved.
Got about, we're about ready to start. According to my watch, it's already 6, so. Alright, let's call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. And by the way, I am not Jan Dowker, she couldn't be with us tonight, Karen Anderson, so I'm filling in for her. I can't say that I can fill her shoes, but we'll all do the best we can. Okay, so with that, Michelle, would you please take the roll for us?
Jen Dowker, as mentioned, not here tonight. Chris Kurtz.
Here.
Abigail Smith.
Here.
Brett Wing.
Here.
Karen Anderson.
Here.
Melissa, sorry, she's not present either. And John Van Bentham.
Very good, and I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. And there's, anyone have any changes? Minutes? Okay, with that then I would ask for a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second?
I'll second.
1 second. Okay, could you please take the roll, Michelle, for that vote?
It's okay, I didn't
I
even.
don't
Oh,
have a
that's
motion
all right.
sheet, Michelle, sorry.
Nope, no worries.
See, we impressed you with the cheat sheet. Motion sheet.
Take care of us, but not yourselves.
Even.
So, Chris Kurtz.
I need to abstain, I wasn't present at that meeting.
Abigail Smith.
I'll abstain for the same reason.
Brett Wing.
Yes.
Karen Anderson.
Yes.
And John Van Bentham.
Yes.
I think the minutes passed. I'm not sure if that was enough votes or not.
It was.
Okay. Okay, so let's begin. Our second item on the agenda is the Gateway BD-PUD and FDP amendment. It's a final development plan and PUD amendment request to create 4 commercial lots from a large pad site. Chris, did you want to introduce staff?
Yes, thank you. As you all know, our former community development director and planner both left at about the same time. And since then, we've been being supported with a planning team from Baseline Engineering. Baseline is the town engineer for all intents and purposes on a consulting basis. And they have a strong team of planners, and so it's great to have them fill in and support us as we move through this transition. So I'd like to introduce the 3 of them that are here tonight. First, I'll introduce Ben Thurston, who's the Director of Planning at Baseline. Ben actually worked with us on the Rec Center project as a project manager, so we get to know him really well and have a lot of trust and faith in him and his team. Will Charles, Principal Planner from Baseline, who's handling most of our day-to-day kind of planning activities, and he will make the presentation tonight and be here for technical questions. And then Lauren Richardson, who's Associate Planner, also supporting the team. So happy to have them here with us tonight, and I'll turn the time over to Will, if that's okay.
Can I stop you for just one moment? Did we ask if, to make sure that see if there were people on Zoom? I forgot to ask about that.
Yeah, there is, and they're good to go.
Okay, great, sorry.
So Lauren will actually take this first.
Oh, great, thank you.
So I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, thanks, Will.
Well, good evening, planning commissioners. Like Chris had mentioned, my name's Lauren. And so tonight, we will be discussing the PUD/FDP amendment for Gateway BD. Got our little front slide here. We've got our normal public hearing information guide, if anybody would to check that out. All right. So tonight, my presentation is going to be on the PUD/FDP amendment for Gateway BD. Here are a few items of pertinent data for this project. We've got the vicinity map right here. The applicant is Placer Development, Inc. They are also the property owner. The parcel numbers, there's two, but mostly it's just one. I'll explain. The current zoning is PUD. The size is 3.15 acres, and the applicant's request tonight is that the final development plan and planned unit development amendment request to create 4 commercial lots from a large pad site. Right. A little background about this site. The entire area in red, you can see that there, is made up of mostly one large parcel that is a rectangle and a little sliver at the bottom you can see. But the area, along with a lot of other surrounding land, was originally approved by the town in 2002 as part of the PUD that spanned 77 acres. The FDP for Gateway Park First Filing Phase 2 will be the FDP to be amended here. Originally, the FDP identifies the area, this specific subject property, as commercial and designates 4 building envelopes on that lot. The property currently contains a parking lot with no buildings. Okay, so this slide is showing the surrounding land use of the subject area. It includes single-family residential and vacant to the north, single-family residential to the west, commercial to the east, and vacant to the south. Okay, so this is a snapshot from the FDP amendment that was submitted, showing how the lots would be split. The goal of the reconfiguration is to allow each lot to be sold and developed individually. This would entail each lot's development to be reviewed by town staff during the site plan phase. There is no proposed change in zoning. All lots shall default to the C2 zoning standards for items that are not specified on this amended FDP. Like I said, as each lot develops, parking will be reviewed and assessed to ensure that it is in conformance with the code. This is a snapshot, obviously, of just the PUD and the C2 zoning. And as you can see, there is no change for that. All right. So the Town of Berthoud's development code no longer includes criteria for review for PUDs. Therefore, we use the final plat review criteria, since both processes have similar submittal requirements. So the review criteria for final plat contains 3 main questions. One is basically, is the final plat substantially in conformance with the previously approved preliminary plat? Does it meet the requirements of the current code, development code? Are they changing land use? Are there major changes that warrant a new preliminary plat? So our finding for this first criteria was that the project does meet this criterion. It does not check any of the boxes that signal a major shift in a preliminary plat. The amended plan conforms to the final drainage report from the first filing for Phase 2 FDP and was reviewed by the town engineers. The second question is the development complies with this code, the comprehensive plan, and the port plan. So our findings conclude that it does indeed comply with both of these. The application poses no changes that would contradict the port plan. Third is all applicable technical standards, including the provision of water in sufficient amount and quality, have all been met. Our findings were that yes, the amendment does meet this, and the Public Works Department and the town engineers have reviewed the application and no conflicts were found. And finally, staff recommends Planning Commission make a motion to recommend approval of the PUD/FDP amendment and to the town board with the following condition. Prior to the town board meeting, the applicant shall address all outstanding staff comments. And I believe the applicant is here. Is Jason? Yeah, I knew it. Jason is here for questions if you guys need. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Applicant?
Good evening, how are you guys?
Good evening.
Jason Hebb, 528 8th Street, Berthoud, Colorado. So I'm here to just answer any questions about sort of the impetus behind the need for some of what we're doing today and to be hopefully helpful and anything that you guys might be questioning. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very nice. Does anybody have any specific questions?
Pretty simple.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
It alludes here to that you may already have like a pending businesses interested in these lots, at least one.
Yeah.
Is that
That is true, yeah, so prior to the change in staff, we worked very closely with them to try to find the best way to help the Gateway Business Park here become a productive area for the community. And the impetus really for this was one of our wonderful local businesses was currently experienced a lot of need over the last couple years, especially since COVID and serving our community. And because of that, they looked for a place to grow to be able to serve their customers better. So the business that we're currently working on for one of the properties is actually Berthoud Pharmacy and Drug. And if you guys know much about them, they are a local company that is here not because of rooftops and metrics and all the things. They're here because they love this community and they're raising their family in this community. And they're relating to their customers. Part of the customer base that they serve is obviously elderly as one of the portion of their customers. In their current location, it's very hard for elderly to basically get in and get out of their facility. The parking is a challenge, et cetera, right? In addition to that, it's hard to continue to provide the services and to grow correctly because of the limitations of the facility. So they started working together with Adams Bank and Trust, Placer Development, to find a new home for them to continue to be able to provide the services that they provide today. And we took this as an opportunity then also to work together with other local businesses and property owners in the area to try to figure out how do we take the development, as you guys saw, approved in 2002 is now 2023. It's been a really long time, right? And part of the reason for that is just the adventure of real estate and, so really the project today is about helping to bring it back into a place that it can become productive for the community again. And we are excited not to just work with a great local business, but also to try to be a place where we can invite other great companies for this community to come in and share services.
Commissioners, other questions?
I don't have any questions about, that's after minutes.
I guess I have one question. It may or may not be out of scope. I'm kind of learning my my way around, but a lot of pharmacies will have a drive-through. Would that impact us at all?
No, so actually the plan, and I'm not, I think that is on the agenda tonight too as well, right? Is it
Well, the site plan,
the site
if
plan
I
is?
may, yeah. Tonight's hearing is mostly the PUD/FDP amendment, and the site plan, which will include analysis of the drive-through, is also going through, but it's not a quasi-judicial process, it's administratively approved. But we take all comments into account when doing the process.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for that clarification. Again, the staff's been really helpful to help us navigate the best way to kind of go through this process. And so, yeah, that's all basically been vetted. It's been turned in and really looked hard at. I think the goal again, and the reason that the drive-through is so important again, is just more about their ability to serve customers, especially elderly who are dealing with the challenges of weather, getting in and out of cars and that kind of stuff. And so I think it's going to be a good opportunity for them to enhance the essential service that they're currently providing.
Are you anticipating that the alley on the west side of the property will stay in place?
100%, absolutely. So there will be no actual physical changes to any of the existing parking or access ways. It was important for us that was part of the cleanup. We had a couple of random outlots that existed there that were sort of just weird things, And so as a part of this process, we're just redefining lot lines to just make it a little bit cleaner. And then from a business owners association, it makes it very clear and easy to understand how everything is getting maintained and taken care of properly, so that, things like snow removal and landscape and maintenance and all that stuff that's important when the center is actually truly active and productive is a good and safe place for people to drive, And so those former outlots actually they were owned by another individual who's no longer even around or involved in the project anymore. And so we were able to coordinate with them and work out a way for us to gain the ownership so that we can incorporate them within the BOA and the maintenance plans that go along with the subdivision. So it's something I think that needed to happen, because the risk of not doing that is ultimately that we have property owned by somebody else who's disconnected with the community and therefore not taking care of it. And we wanted to make sure that, especially because that alleyway you're referring to is not a public right of way. So, the town isn't responsible for taking care of it. We needed to have the authority to do it and to ensure it properly in order for it to work right.
Any questions at this point?
Well, thank you, guys. I know that, sometimes change and growth and development is hard, but I do want you to know that we love this community. We're here, we live here. We're really trying to do something that adds value to the community, and hopefully we're not going anywhere. So we're grateful to be here today and getting to meet you, and I hope that we have more opportunities to talk about bringing good businesses to this community.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for your commitment to our town. Okay. All right, with that, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. 6:15. Is there anyone who has comments they'd like to make? You're limited to 3 minutes. Please come to the podium, state your name and your address. Anyone from Zoom?
I'm giving it just another second here. It looks like there is nobody.
With that, then we'll close the public hearing. So any questions, comments? Go ahead.
I've got some comments probably for staff, or just a couple of questions, just on process.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know if you need to be up here or not, or how that all works, figure this out.
Yes.
Just a question, I'm not sure how far through like the PUD got, like architecture, design guidelines and stuff, does that stay with kind of the PUD approval? Does this get rezoned, like what's happening
Yeah.
procedurally with this?
Well, normally PUDs do sometimes include the architectural standards as well as, parking standards, all that stuff. In this case, we had sort of a limited view for the PUD, so architecture, and that's all gonna be sort of the site plan this time.
Okay.
Mostly just the PUD, we had one page of that, which just, happens when, things are old and on Mylar and
Sure.
all of that business. So
So
I'm not
I
sure
guess-
if that answered your question or not.
I mean, it doesn't, I mean, I think I understand what's going on, the question is like, there's a couple of existing buildings that are going
Yes.
to at some point kind of be part of this kind of family of buildings.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if like, is the architecture gonna have some reason and some actual kind of documented means to keep it sort of uniform and to make sure that things kind of look like they belong together? That was what, 2002 or whatever the applicant said?
Yeah, the very original one, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so a handful of PUDs in town have really strict architectural guidelines. Most of the old PUDs did not.
Okay.
There were a lot of kind of one-page PUDs that existed in town. So we would be relying on our current architectural requirements and it won't, I think, likely look exactly like the ones that were built 20 years ago.
Okay.
It'll be I'm sure the architecture will be much more modern. I mean, we've seen elevations, I think are happy with them.
Okay.
They meet our existing code,
Yes.
but there's no requirement that they look like the buildings adjacent to them.
So they'll have to comply with like the commercial development
The
zoning
current
regs and
commercial
design regs
development
and
architectural
stuff like that.
guidelines, yeah.
Okay, but this is gonna stay PUD, this doesn't get rezoned as a function of this process?
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
And then one thing in the motion that was a little bit nebulous was comply with outstanding staff comments. Do we know what those are?
Yes, well, there were just a few.
Okay.
And that was actually before they resubmitted some of the items just recently, too late to be part of tonight's hearing, but it was mostly, add this letter, correct this and move this over, the label, move the label. Those were mostly of the planning comments that we had. The engineering comments were also pretty minor, that's why we felt comfortable enough bringing this to you tonight. We just pretty much just wanted to keep that on there just to make sure there weren't any other concerns basically.
It seems like a pretty broad statement, but if the applicant's okay.
It is indeed,
Okay.
it is, but that was the thinking behind that.
Okay, alright, thanks. That was it for me.
John brought up an issue too about landscaping. How will landscaping be made consistent with the existing landscaping there as the new buildings are in?
Yes, well, each lot will have to have its own site development plan, yes, that's right. And with that process comes an evaluation of the landscaping and the architecture. So it's mostly at that time that the uniform architectural layout will sort of take place and each one compared to another.
Walkways and that kind of thing as
Yes,
well? Okay. Any other questions, comments? Entertain a motion?
I would make a motion to a recommendation of approval of the Gateway BD PUD and FDP amendment to the town board with the following condition. Prior to the town board meeting, the applicant shall address all outstanding staff comments.
I'll second.
Seconds. And Michelle would ask that you call the roll.
Chris Kurtz,
Yes.
Abigail Smith,
Yes.
Brett Wing,
Yes.
Karen Anderson,
Yes.
John Van Bethlen.
Yes.
It's a unanimous vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move to the third item on our agenda today. We'll be talking about Farmstead Acres Neighborhood Master Plan and rezoning. The applicant is requesting a rezoning to urban residential of 4.82 acres, suburban residential of 1.10 acres, M-1 industrial of 2.77 acres, and C-1 commercial for 0.32 acres from the formerly approved Summers PUD and the neighborhood master plan approval for attached and detached residential lots.
Good evening. So as mentioned before, my name is Will. And I'll go ahead and do this presentation real quick. So again, same as Lauren's presentation, just the kind of format of the public hearing, which we've been through once, so I won't read through on that one. But yeah, so the property is, or the project is labeled as Farmstead Acres. And it's this parcel, as you can see on the property, about 9 acres in size. Similar to the previous one, this one currently is zoned PUD. It's the Somers PUD, which is a pretty minimal and kind of vague PUD, which I know you guys have kind of seen this in that October meeting, so I won't go too much into that that historicalness of it. But just know that there is kind of industrial portions on that northern end closer to Mountain Avenue or East County Road. Southern portions where that quote unquote mixed use or more dense development on the south side. So just taking a look at that zoning map, the tan section, which is the whole property, is zoned that PUD with a little bit of mountain overlay for the portions that when we get to the rezoning will be considered that some of that industrial and then some of that commercial space. This is also from the comprehensive plans, that preferred land use map. So as you can see on here, this property, between the two sections of it has some of that urban residential, some of that suburban residential, and it kind of borders the areas between those two sections. So it kind of, there's those two zones basically all around it in each direction. So first thing on the list of the two is that neighborhood master plan. So as you can see, the applicant after their October meeting took all the comments they received at this meeting and revised their plans. And just for the record on this plan as well as the next one, it's kind of shifted now to be a landscaped. So north is to the left on these two drawings in case that gets confusing. But anyways, so for the plan, like I said, they took the comments from the last meeting and went back to the drawing board and revised their plans. The main differences are the removal of the park on the north or on the eastern side of the property for more of a pocket park design, as well as a change from the more townhome style or multi-attached units down to duplex units is what they're proposing. So it's a little bit lower density as far as what their new plans are. So between the old plan and this one, so the old one had 49 units in mostly townhome fashion, whereas this one will have 37 units with these duplexes taking up the tan portions and that yellow portion being more single family residential units. The one thing I would also like to mention that the applicant has in their plans but wouldn't necessarily be something that is approved or denied tonight is a request for accessory dwelling units on a majority of these properties. Those are handled through conditional use permits. So that would come back before this board if that is something you guys are interested in granting for these units. So that would increase that density up to the code basically considers an ADU a third of a unit. So that would bump it up to about similar to what they had on the previous plan.
What
But
was
again,
that called?
a conditional use permit. Yeah, so again, that I just wanna make sure that's aware, but that would be handled through that separate process.
That would, I'm sorry, I'm probably out of order, but that would come in front of us, right?
Correct.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah, so anyways, getting on to the neighborhood master plan criteria. There are these 5, and don't worry, I do not plan on reading all of the words word for word for you guys. But the first one is basically that it conforms to the zoning district map and comprehensive plan land use map. As shown on that previous slide, this one is more or less in those suburban residential, urban residential, which are the two kind of zone districts they're aiming for on this neighborhood master plan. The next one is that it's a functional system of land that conforms to the chapter, comprehensive plan, to the port plan, Staff has found that it does conform to these plans. They're connecting to the existing roadway through those extensions from the properties to the east. Next criteria is the, basically this is the, does it meet all the transportation, utility, open space, pedestrian, walkways, all of that fun stuff. And so for this one, again, since it's connecting to the local roadways, it has connection through the trail access on the southern side of the property. And it has, those local amenities that I mentioned previously. So we found that it did meet that one. Next one is negative impacts on adjacent land uses have been identified and satisfactorily mitigated. This one, I think, through the previous planning commission meeting in October, the applicant went back and took the comments they received to heart. And really revised the plan to be something different than what it was previously, from that higher density, more compact units, to a little more spaced out. And so I would say that they have mitigated those negative impacts. And then the last one is the desirability with the community, and achieve balance of land uses. So again, referencing it back to the comprehensive plan, that this area is called for that suburban urban residential. And this density really kind of hits in the middle of what those two zone districts aim to do with this. They're kind of on the lower end of what the density would be in that urban residential. So I think it's a nice balance and a kind of transition between those two districts. And then I'll go ahead and just jump into the rezoning. So as you can see on this plan, so again, these are now north-south, or north is up on the plans. So there's a little portion at the top of this map that is C1, that's that 0.32 acres. The next portion is that 2.77 acres of industrial. Not much is planned to change on those two at this point. The only real major change would be access, which right now, that industrial portion goes through Bermuda Road, and another driveway that kind of connects up to the east. Then the two portions with, the main focus of the neighborhood master plan. They have the urban residential for 4.82 acres, and then the suburban residential for that 1.1 acres just on the south side. So for rezonings, they only are required to meet, they must meet a minimum of one of these criteria. So staff, or we have found that it meets particularly conditions 2 and 4. So condition 2 being to rezone an area or extend boundary of an existing district because of change or changing conditions. Again, this one was zoned that very vague PUD where it didn't really define much. What they're asking to do is similar to what they maybe could have done under that PUD, but it meets those new zone districts, rezones the property to those, and makes it a lot clearer what can be done in the future. The other one, in a similar vein, is the proposed rezoning is necessary to provide land for community-related use, and then the rezoning will be consistent with the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan. More that second half of that, of being consistent with the comprehensive plan, again, changing it from that more vague PUD really makes it more concrete what and will be done with those properties. So for both of these, staff is recommending a motion to recommend approval to the town board. The only thing being with the rezoning, we would recommend a condition for approval of the neighborhood master plan prior to the rezoning, as it is a requirement of that. The rezoning is required neighborhood master plan. There we go. That was a lot of words. But yeah, so that is my presentation. The applicant does have it as well, but I can answer any questions if you have them for me now, or I can let them come up.
I have one quick just clarification. So the zoning, can you just kind of once more run through the comparative zoning of the PUD versus the zoning proposed in the comp plan versus the zoning proposed here?
Yeah, so zoning of the PUD, imagine if you took, I don't know if I can get the PowerPoint back up, but imagine where, you know, that second line is. So at the south end of the industrial property.
Right.
Right there is where in the PUD basically called industrial, and then on the bottom it was mixed use, like it was very vague.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what it is today. As far as what the rezoning is proposing, it would be a little tiny commercial portion up at the right along Mountain Avenue. Industrial staying as it is today. The urban residential being that green middle portion. And then just the most southern row of homes would be that suburban residential.
Okay, and the comp plan is recommending.
And the comp plan, so the comp plan has it listed as kind of a halfway between that urban and suburban residential, so it calls for most of this southern portion to be that suburban, the top being urban. But it is, you know, bordering on either side of it, it has, you know, either of those two zonings as proposed, so it's kind of in that transitionary period right on the borders of the comp plan.
No, I
as
get it,
written.
I'm assuming the density conversation is gonna come up, and I just kinda wanna get us preloaded for a little bit. So
Sure.
like, what the relative densities that we're, I mean, obviously, we've kinda got the house count, former versus now. Just kinda wondering from like zoning as it relates to density as proposed, required, whatever.
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Alright, so in the comp plan,
Yeah.
it's kind of in on a border zone.
Yeah.
What would the density per the comp plan want to be?
I'm not sure if I have a number for you for that. You know, I will say that this urban residential covers a wide range of different building types and things like that. And I would say that these duplexes are on the lower end of what that density can allow for.
That's what I was
in that
trying to
zone
kind of like,
district.
I was trying to remember from October
Yeah,
is kind of, I mean, we have actual numbers here, so I mean, we actually have sort of a proposed density. I'm just trying to make sure that we sort of understand that proposed density
Right.
versus what.
yeah, so unfortunately I don't have that number off my head, but I will say, you know, with this again being in that kind of area where it borders those two recommendations in the comp plan, they're kind of also taking a density and a design type that is also kind of on that border between the two districts.
Alright, thanks, I just wanted to kind of get that clear in my head.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have a question on the lots, but I think the developer's gonna come up.
Yep.
I'll wait until he comes up.
I have a question. Can you clarify for us about the accessory dwelling units?
Sure.
Those are where they're placed.
So I did wanna make sure that was, you know, in front of you as well. So the way those zone districts read is that on a single family residential lot, accessory dwelling units are used by right. So anyone, you know, who wants to apply for one could apply for one. Whenever you get into these, you know, multi-units, so these duplexes, that's when it becomes a conditional use permit. So meaning if you live in a, you know, attached single-family residential or a duplex, you would have to apply for a conditional use permit to add those additional dwellings. With that, the way that the code refers to accessory dwelling units is basically that they're considered 0.33 of a unit. So that would get their density, you know, if after, you know, if this is approved and they come back applying for conditional use permits for all of the lots, that would get that density up to, you know, 49 units for the project. But there are 37, you know, 37 primary dwellings is the proposed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Good to see you again.
I assume you were looking for the applicant. If we could get my presentation. You can do Control Enter too, and it should go to full screen.
Okay. You said control enter.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Doesn't like me, okay. Good change, sorry.
There you go, full screen mode. Is that what you were looking for?
Yes,
Yeah, there you go.
thank you.
Good evening. And again, from our past discussion in October. We are pleased to go back through this again with you. We got some great feedback on the October meeting, and we took that to heart, as the staff has mentioned. And we did work with the staff very closely, again, with the previous staff actually, right before they left, and then also with Will as well going through this. And we feel that we've created a better solution here that does transition to into the neighborhood much better than what we were proposing before. If you remember from that previous application, I didn't include that in here tonight, but what we had was townhomes because that's what we thought was really a good fit between the industrial that's to the north and that transition, so that heavier use to the north of industrial and pushing that back down. The zoning actually on the PUD and the allowances on the PUD allowed for that type of use. But of course, over time, other development has come in and that transition wasn't appropriate. And so we pushed more towards a duplex, which really takes a building that is anywhere between 4 and 6 units together, maybe 100 feet in length. And it really takes a building down into a duplex size of maybe 20 to 30 foot. And then when you see that, and I'll bring the just some representations of what we think these duplexes could look like, that building really is the same size as a single family detached and a lot of those that are around us. So the context of what we created here, we feel fits in very well to the neighborhood from that perspective. The other things that we heard in that meeting from before is the need to remove the park, and that was, I would say, a compromise with Planning Commission and that feedback, and the need for us to have that density to make this project work, but that burden of those large requirements with the park and everything that went into it. And so we've come back with, again, a smaller pocket park because there are other parks within this area. And we think the street pattern is much better as well. So I'll just go through a couple of these slides. You probably saw a bunch of them from last time. I don't want to bore you again with all of those. These are some pictures of what's out there currently, of course, the industrial on the north side that you pick out, and then residential around us, and of course, looking back to the west. And we currently look west into a vacant field, but we know that development will come and that other gap that's there right now will be filled in. And that's one of the other things that we did in the plan is we really tried to incorporate our street pattern with what's left in that area. We took that one and I'll show you that here in the plan as well. The rezone that Will went through is something that we're working through here, and it's really a cleanup of that PUD. The PUD didn't really let us move forward in the process that we needed to. So that's part of one of the documents that we're processing, of course, the neighborhood plan. And then you're not seeing this one tonight, but we also have a minor subdivision because we have different ownerships between the industrial and residential that we'll end up with. So that will come before you, I think, in the future, so. the zoning side of it and that stepping through the progression. And I think maybe back to the question of density, what we typically see in multifamily is something between, townhomes that could be ranging from 12 units to the acre. And we weren't quite that before, but we were getting very close to that, up to, sometimes we can get into that 16 units to the acre. We are down, if you're just counting the duplex units, the primary units, not the ADU units, we are actually at about a 6. Typical residential, single-family detached in that suburban category can go anywhere between 3 and 5 units to the acre. Most of the stuff that's around us is probably more in that 3.5 units to the acre. So again, that transition from that higher intensity to the north with that industrial and that blend back down into this melting pot of, around 6 to that 3.5, we feel is really appropriate in this area. Here again, the commercial, the industrial, and then the urban residential and the suburban residential. That suburban is really the same thing that is there to the east or to the south of what we have. And as was mentioned previously as well, the new zoning that you do have and the criteria that you have in place really is a great tool for creating some additional affordability, attainability within your neighborhood. It has different patterns than traditional patterns of standard, R1 and R2 zoning and the flavor and genericness that may go along with that sometimes. So you do have a lot of uses that are mixed in there. And again, we went a little more standard in with the duplex side of it, and we pushed that density down from that side. Here again, you're seeing the rotation of this plan, so hopefully we won't throw you off on this one, but this is just an overall context map on those different uses. And then we're breaking down into the commercial all the way up into the top. That's something that is really more blending towards the overall plan that will probably be there in the future. We know that there's gonna be commercial or office uses that will go along Mountain or County Road 8 there. And so we're setting it up for that. We're using that existing house that's out there today as that conversion of that. The existing industrial that's there, we're really not changing anything with that. That will stay in place. We're just putting the lines around and formalizing that industrial as part of this process. And then we have the neighborhood plan for the suburban and urban, again to the south of that area. We create this buffer between that industrial and that residential with needed storm drainage that's out there, and it creates that residential buffer. We also have those units with the alley or the garages that will face the industrial, and so you're not getting the front door of your units actually looking at industrial. You're getting the utilitarian side of that product actually fronting that industrial area there in that buffer. And all these duplexes and even the single-family detached homes will front onto the public streets that are there within this neighborhood. This classification of urban residential actually requires us to have alleys as part of this. And so again, you're not getting a garage-dominant product with the duplexes. You're actually getting all front door, porches, those things as you drive down the streetscape. And the garages are accessed from alleys on the backside. We are a very unique piece in here because of our, width that we have, and so these are a little deeper than what you would typically see. So you have a little more, if you do have these duplexes, you have a little more yard space within these areas from that alley out to the back of the house from that side. Back to the west, again, we have this sliver that's left there. There is an alley that's just off on the edge of this print here, and we have an alley along our edge. This pattern can really be replicated back into that middle very easily. And so we've kind of thoughtfully tried to work that out as well with the staff. And then the line that you're seeing up on the top for Remuda is actually a request that was made. Hey, can we actually make the connection from our property over to the property that's over to the west that's built environment already? And yes, we can. We can hit your criteria. We don't really need to change anything that we have in our plan or jog anything. We'll work that out again as we get into further engineering of it, just to make sure, but there's definitely the opportunity there to make that connection from that side. This, again, is just conceptual, building form and scale and what these might look like. So you're seeing again duplex units here on all the way in the top left, where you get the front doors there. And then as you work to the bottom here, and also to the right side of this, you're seeing some of the rear architecture, garages and so forth, that you're gonna see possibly with these units. So in summary for us, again, we took the feedback that you gave us. We really think we put this plan together, working very closely with your staff and with that feedback, and came up with a hopefully better plan for everyone. Hopefully everybody agrees with that. This again still provides that housing diversity and attainability within your community. These are units that will be in that mid-range probably, to possibly even, on the more attainable side within the market. And it changes every day from the market perspective. We don't have exact pricing yet on this product. That will come when we actually get a builder lined up for the project. We maintain the northern industrial commercial and those offices and that tax base, of course, for Berthoud. That does not change here with that. Another key point is we really cut off that industrial from going through the neighborhood today. That will go out, and we've severed that connection really, so this residential community will live and operate really within with the extension of infrastructure that's currently there to the east, and then ultimately with connections through the property back to the west there as well. But you're not getting industrial traffic coming through this area. Additional infrastructure, of course, is being extended. And this also helps from systems like water systems where we don't have dead ends anymore. This infrastructure will ultimately connect with that. And then again, I think one of the better points here that we've created, instead of that larger scale with the homes, we've created something that's more in context with what's around us. Yes, we have duplexes, but that scale of that house is very similar to those homes that are around us. So that is our presentation. Happy to answer any questions for you and appreciate your time tonight.
Could you go back a slide to the drawings? Yeah. So here's my question on this. As I look at the 32, I just want to understand this. As I look at the 32 lots, the urban lots, proportionally they look skinny, if you will. So as I look at this, so for example, of the 6 pictures, the top left one.
Yep.
So I see one door there. So this is a duplex, and I'm assuming it's running entirely long ways. So essentially there's 2 buildings that run long ways. Is that your plan? Is that accurate?
Actually, the division will be probably right here where this
Exactly.
break in the plane is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're getting one house that, and maybe looking at this one to the bottom here too. There's a front door back over here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then now while we're staying on this exact same subject, is we go to the top middle picture, right? That's the garage in the alleyway. So you've depicted this, it looks like two-car garage.
Yep.
So based on the width of this lot, is that a reality? Because I don't know how wide that's gonna
Yes.
have to be, 12, 14, 16 feet.
Oh, 2-car garage is somewhere
20 feet?
between 18 and 20 feet.
Yeah,
Yep.
so there's 40 feet, so I can't tell the dimension of these lots.
Yep.
But 2 40-feet garages
No,
will, 20 feet, I apologize, excuse me.
40-foot total, yep,
Would fit
yes,
on what you've designed.
yes.
Okay.
And it's important to realize that in the duplex scenario, those 2 30-foot lots function as one lot because there's 0 lot line, right? So they're attached product, the lot line splits the building. And so it's really like a 60-foot wide lot if you think about it that way. Those 2 30-foot lots together.
I'm glad you said that, so
the
based on-
the duplexes don't get fit on one 30-foot lot.
okay, so this 32 lots, really, the 2 lots, each lot holds its own half of a duplex, is that-
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
That was good clarification, I appreciate that. Okay.
And So while we're on that, I do have one other clarification on, I guess, the envisioned product. So it would be an attached garage, so there would be a structure, the main living space into a garage, it wouldn't be a detached garage where you would have like a small.
There's a possibility it could. This is just one concept for duplexes. There are other concepts out there that you could do a detached garage and then have area between your back door and the garage. It creates a little more seclusion maybe if you look at it from that perspective too. So there are options with the duplex and the standards that you have that is an option as well.
Okay, so kind of to be determined, I
Yeah.
guess. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
One of the comments in some of the letters we got from some of the neighbors was a concern about how tight it would be coming out of their garage in this alleyway. I gotta believe, I'm ignorant to this, that there's zoning that says how large
Yes.
that has to be, right?
Yes.
So you would conform with whatever.
Yeah,
The zoning
exactly.
is.
You would, and we, as designers and also those who would be building this, do not wanna put a product out there that does not work or function, right? So, yes, you would make sure that whatever that alley width was, or whatever the drive aprons were, or the setback from that, let's say it was a detached garage that was up closer to the alley, you would make sure it was set back far enough that you could maneuver into your garage and so forth, yes.
Thank you. Oh, one last thing. How do you define mid-range?
Mid-range in, sorry,
I
price
believe
point?
I think that's what you're referring to.
Oh, for I think you're talking price point here
Yeah.
roughly, right? Yeah, so what we typically look for is what is more attainable. We throw around attainable and affordable a lot of times, right? We're not the affordable side of it. We're not being subsidized on this project. It's nothing in that sense. So this is more of something that will fall into the average house that you're seeing in the market today is more in that $450 to even $525 up in this area. That's probably a little more mid-range for us, that we see that average, I would say is maybe another way to term that mid-range. Whereas you're going, pushing up into sometimes the sevens for some of the single family detached that you see around, or if you push back down, if we were talking about the townhomes that we had before, those were probably, maybe $50,000 to $75,000 cheaper than what these duplexes would be.
The square footage estimate?
Square footage is actually, these could range, especially with the lots as well and how deep they are. The square footage could range anywhere from, 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. So that will really again be dependent upon the builder coming in and doing a deep dive into the market, what's out there, what's needed in the market. And what will people pay for, and also then that price point's gonna be very sensitive, as we know today, because of interest rates, so they'll fit that in, but those are typically ranges that you see.
And the builder would determine basements or not?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions at this point?
I think I have a few questions, and one, just thanks for, I guess, taking our feedback into consideration from the October meeting. So it is, there was a holiday season in between there, and so getting back into the cobwebs of what we talked about. So in this new layout, the park, I guess, on the eastern side has been removed to accommodate the lower density, which I know was something that was requested by, I guess, the larger we. There was talk of putting some sort of landscape screening between the existing farmstead development and what you were proposing, and I suppose I could kind of see that, I guess, what would be on the southern side, but along the eastern portion, is the intent just to be, I guess, there's an existing fence line, or there would be a fence line, but is there going to be a landscape screen?
Yeah, we got, I think, some feedback on that buffer and that park. We thought it was a great setting and great buffer to the neighborhood. But we removed that, and so what we have currently is the alley that would ride that back fence line. And that fence line, we can see maintaining that fence line. It's more of an open fence to some extent. It's not a solid 6-foot fence or anything that really creates that buffer. We would definitely work with neighbors if that wanted to change. I don't think we have an issue with that. But I also think a good point here is these lots are pretty deep too. Again, so even if you were gonna do, let's say, a detached garage, to the points that we talked about, maneuverability, those types of things, The garages are still going to be back, probably 15, 20 feet. Actually probably more than that, I'm sorry, the alley there is about 15 feet, so the garage is probably gonna be like 25, maybe even 30 feet from that property line. So you're still gonna have some pretty good distance in there for that. The landscaping would come with the lot and what they do individually with that. But the other side of it is because they are duplexes, there's probably not gonna be a lot of room that you would see through on those sides, or you're really just talking about one side of that area. So I think that landscaping would be very complementary to anything that the existing residents have today. That situation's very, very similar to that. And looking into their backyards, looking into our backyards, that context is really the same. I would think that there wouldn't be too much of a difference there.
Gotcha.
So is the existing garages back up to an alley, the homes that are already there?
No, just the backyards I was talking about.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you're
that's-
correct.
okay.
Those are to the east of us, those are front-loaded
Okay.
units.
Okay.
Yep.
So the setup would be, unless somebody put a structural screen or their own landscape screen, you would be looking past the alley at garage doors.
Yep.
And just for clarification, there is a fence existing.
Yes.
It's just more open and not a full 6-foot fence.
Yeah, you can kind of see it in this middle one here.
I see, yeah.
If you can enlarge it, it is looks like a picket, but it's open picket. It's it's not
Yeah.
closed gap there. So. Actually, that bottom right has it as well on the side yard.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering that. And then this might be more of a question for staff, but I think the original design, did it have any parking, or I know sometimes
Yeah, parking question, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the previous concept actually would have required parking because of that layout, because of that use and so forth. This one does not require that because we have on-street parking. So
Sure.
if you think about this, there's no driveway anymore in the front coming off the street that impedes that use in the front for that street. So we actually probably have more parking here than we even had on the last plan, right? Well, when you think about it from that side. Plus you also have driveway parking if needed. And if we were actually using this product that we have,
rear driveway.
yeah, exactly. And then also if we were actually using the product that we're showing here, you've got 2 parking spaces in the garage. So this one has much more parking than the previous concept.
Gotcha.
And there's no requirement really that you have to have designated parking areas because of the on-street parking and so forth. So
Gotcha. No, thank you for
Yeah.
addressing that. I don't think I have any other questions.
This might be for Will. I heard this mentioned a couple times, and I'm sorry, I don't know what it means. Additional dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, what's that referring to?
So for us and Will explained, and he can jump in here as well. So on the suburban lots, the lots that are actually on the south, that's a permitted or it's permitted in meaning somebody could come in and say, hey, I want to convert the space above my garage into a mother-in-law suite or have that space converted into something that we can rent, right? And the same thing on the duplexes, that is a conditional use, so we would have to come back and ask for that actually. But we were showing more in context of, hey, if we actually did add ADUs everywhere here, because that helps the attainability side within your community too. There's additional units actually out here in the neighborhoods that people can rent. But if we're talking about the duplex side of it, what that can mean is most times it's above the garage. Okay, it's an additional space that's above the garage. I think you also have standards that it can only be 600 or 800 square feet roughly, and those are pretty traditional, so they're not massive. It doesn't really change a lot of times the structure because it's just above the garage and you think it's actually part of the living space of the house, but it's actually a separate.
But typically, this would be built at the time the units are being built, would be built as part of them?
Typically, yes, but I've seen conversion happen after the fact, but not as much. So.
Yeah, like in Denver, it is after the fact.
Yeah.
Just because they didn't exist back in the day.
Right, and in most areas in town where we have ADUs, they're after the fact. They're being added above garages in downtown, places like that.
Second stories on a house, would that qualify or would that be something different?
The accessory dwelling unit can be an attached accessory dwelling unit or a detached, so it just depends on the nature of how the property owner wants to apply.
Okay, thank you very much.
And for both the suburban and the duplex style homes, they would need to ask permission or request.
So the suburban,
Suburban, is it
I think
allows
is a
it?
use by right.
Yeah,
Okay,
use by
so
right.
that one,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be an additional process, it would just be the duplexes
Yeah.
that require additional process, okay.
And you'd still have to go through your building permit
Right,
process
I was
as well.
gonna say
and-
there's still other
Yeah.
processes.
So,
So, and you can abstain from answering the question, but so the ADU question is gonna come before us again. I guess, does this layout work without ADUs, I guess for you all? If we were to not approve a conditional use permit down the road?
oh yeah, no, this is not a hindrance to us. This is really for us, what we are seeing growing and growing and growing in the market, that demand, right? Because there are still those individuals that, cannot find somewhere to live, or again, it might just be mother-in-law suite or something like that, right? So that demand is really growing out there. And when you have the existing infrastructure already in place, it's very easy to just add that at such very low cost. And so just trying to think ahead, this is more future planning for us and trying to see that, and also trying to gauge the market conditions that are out there and the market demands for that. Because as we just talked about an average house being $500,000, that's a lot of money yet, right? So that's really all it is, and for us, again, it's not something, that's detrimental to our project, the 37 units, the density of 6 there, that's really the key and the crux of this project, so.
That answers my question, yeah, I appreciate you clarifying, but yeah, I mean, ADUs, especially with Berthoud being, I mean, obviously we have jobs here in town, but a lot of folks commute elsewhere, but a lot of people are hybrid, so ADUs can help with that kind of hybrid lifestyle, so.
Yep. Exactly.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I really thank you, because I know you've been through the ringer a few times, so the fact that you really took it and put something that, the board asked for, really appreciate your efforts and work on that.
No, we appreciate it too, and we appreciate the feedback, and it was a great process actually to come to the right solution for all of us, for you as the town and the neighbors, we hope, so.
Great creativity here, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, let's, any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. With that, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to come and speak, please come to the podium, state your name and your address. You have 3 minutes to speak. Anyone on
And
this?
Vice Chair, there is no one online.
Okay. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Catherine Browning. I live at 219 Old Bessie, directly adjacent to what they're talking about. I've got a couple of concerns. One of them is actually pretty recent with the alleyway directly touching our fence, which our community didn't put that up. My neighbor and I, we spent our time busting ground and doing that ourselves. I'm just really hoping to add in some sort of a buffer between the alleyway and the fence, so that way it is not adjacent. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to have the cement directly touching our property, because if things go haywire, if there's snow, if there's ice, I don't want people accidentally backing into my backyard. A little bit of a buffer would be greatly appreciated. The other thing too would be snow removal. We've had a lot of snow this year. Is Colorado? It happens. Where is it all gonna go? I don't want someone clearing out their driveway and throwing it straight into my backyard. What is the plan for that even? Where would it all go? How much room would there be to move it, say, into their side yard versus just push it straight out through the alley? Those are couple of big things that really, really worry me. So an easement I know would help make that transition a lot easier. The other thing too was I did not realize that there was the possible additional dwellings. The main reason we had issues the first time around was the amount of people that they wanted to move into this small area. Especially with the only access being Remuda and Tenderfoot. That was the main issue in the first place. If we're gonna add a whole bunch of extra units, why don't we just say it up front and make it be townhouses again? What's the difference? That was kind of my biggest thing. The density and a little bit of easement, making sure that we can separate ourselves from that fence, because those fences were put up by us, they were not put up by the community. And we'd kind of like to protect our space a little bit over possible vehicle damage, possible things going on that direction as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else? No one else from Zoom at this point?
No
Okay.
questions.
Thank you, Michelle.
So, Eric Shiley, I live at 213 Old Bessie, which is right beside Kate and Marvin. So I had a couple questions for the builder. On your drawing,
Sir, you have to address your questions to
Oh,
us.
I'm sorry.
We can-
okay, I'll ask you guys, are all these gonna be 2 stories? Are the duplex is all 2 stories or some of them 1 stories? Because I just wondered. Is everything gonna look the same? I agree with Kate, we were talking the fence, I think some kind of buffer would be nice there. We hear a lot of, this could change down the road, we don't know how far back the garages are gonna sit. They may sit right on the alley, they may sit back, he can't tell us, he doesn't know yet, so what happens later on, we decide, hey, we're gonna sit it right on the alley. None of that stuff's been, it's like, we have no idea what they're gonna look like, cause we gotta get a builder. Talking about additional, where the alley's gonna be at, where the garages are gonna sit. It seems like there's a lot of, this could change later, but it's already approved, so, I just think that's something to consider. I can't say, don't take my view away, cause I know it's gonna happen. We knew there was gonna be houses back there. At least that's what the builder told us. He didn't tell us there was gonna be duplexes or townhouses, he said there's gonna be houses, but I think that's just something to consider. Maybe we get some more foundation on what's really gonna be put here before we give the okay, cause there's a lot of still variables out there we don't know. Okay, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? See anyone? No one else on Zoom raising their hand again? Okay. All right, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. Questions, comments, commissioners?
Got a couple.
Go ahead.
Just for staff, so the zoning you're proposing, or what the developer's proposing, that zoning relates directly to like the city zoning guidelines, right?
The city zoning guidelines,
Zone-
as in like the
architectural
future
guidelines,
land
like-
use
yeah, like
plan and.
Urban residential and the architecture and requirements and spacings and landscaping. and
Right,
those
so
sorts
there
of things.
there's an architectural review that would go
Yeah.
along with any sort of building submittal for these homes, and it would be required to meet
Okay.
those.
So just to the gentleman's question regarding the architecture, there is some amount of it, while we may not know specifically what the building is, there are guidelines that the developer or any future builder would have to comply with on those parcels.
Correct, yeah, same as anywhere else in the city. If you were going to build a new single family residential duplex townhome, apartment, there are architectural standards or they require a certain amount of, architectural details and uniqueness to them, so not every house is gonna be like a cookie cutter of the exact same thing. That's the intent, is to avoid that and get a, unique group of homes.
Yeah, I've reviewed those guidelines and they're fairly comprehensive while allowing some latitude. So I just wanted to make sure that those were going to be sort of
Absolutely.
enforced in this case.
Yeah.
I did want to follow up also, the snow removal is a great point. and I was kind of thinking the same thing. I coming out of kind of Denver townhouse and where do I put the snow?
Yeah.
Is that something that the city requires? Is that something that you've thought through? The snow removal, fence buffer, all that sort of stuff to me is sort of similar. There needs to be room for stuff to happen around cars.
So the alleys would be private, so it'd be with a, either a metro district or an HOA of these residents, that it would be their requirement to get that plowed. I don't know which one of those the applicant is planning. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. I just wasn't expecting that question tonight, so, but yeah, I'm like a metro district or an HOA would be required to
They would
do
handle
snow
it,
removal.
but I mean, is
Yeah.
there a requirement to plan for where to put it?
Is there, do you know where it is in there?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
I can probably answer a couple of the neighbors' thoughts here on the project, and it goes to the alley. As we were talking before about maneuverability, I wouldn't picture this alley, the concrete itself, actually being on top of their fence or right next to their fence, right? There is maintenance that does need to occur with alleys over time. There is snow that we're talking about. All those things would be taken into consideration when the final plans are put together, and I appreciate, hey, we don't actually have the final plans here tonight. Those come with the processes as we go further into the steps here. But those are all considerations that we have to take into account, that also the town will tell us, hey, we have to meet these requirements, those things. Snow removal on a project like this is probably something that the HOA would maintain. We don't have a metro district on this one. I probably wouldn't propose it on something this small. But the HOA for this neighborhood would take on responsibilities like that because they're common to more than just one lot. So the snow removal would be coordinated with the neighbors, probably the town. They can't just plow it onto the city or town streets and so forth and things like that. So I think those things will be dealt with properly in your standards, and also the standards of the architecture. I agree with that. The standards that are there for suburban and urban residential clearly outline all these processes and what these things will look like. Question about two-story. We showed two-story tonight as a concept, but we're actually allowed to do one-story. So you could have a larger ranch type of home that's built possibly on the corners or maybe even internal to one of the sides as well. So those are all possibilities, but yeah, the maximum is 2 stories. I think that's outlined in the standards. So it would be no taller than the homes that are there around us today. So hopefully I answered those correctly. And then the ADU one again, this is more, again, future planning, whether those ever get built and do they really increase density or do they really increase the number of people that are in the area? That's, they're only counted as a third of a unit within your standards. That really right there speaks to, the amount of traffic that they might generate, the use of the water and sewer and so forth. So I appreciate the concern there that there may be, some additional density, but the likelihood of those occurring, on all the lots, I would think would be pretty small as well.
I think part of what we're struggling with, and I commend you for what you've done to try to address it, but obviously there's a difference in just sort of massing between and usage, frankly, front loaded versus rear loaded and stuff.
Yep.
So we're trying to sort of rectify that difference along that edge.
Yep.
And I think that my concern would be if there's an accessory use now, all of a sudden we have a garage with this sort of perched residential unit that's now looking down into a yard rather than across an alley to another unit.
Yep.
To me, that's a bit of a concern. And I would be interested to look at like if there was some way to sort of say, maybe that block along the east side, we don't allow for an accessory use. We don't allow for that sort of potentiality.
Yeah.
Even though we would have to review it, if there's a way to potentially kind of bake something like that in, that would be something I'd be interested in.
Yeah, and I
Again, just to
think,
kind of help that side to kind of transition and look a little bit more like those folks that are there.
Yeah. and again, for us, we're, this is just more forward planning on our side. We're not totally hinged to that issue. And I think as your standards outline and your code outlines, that's a conditional. We have to come back to you. We would have to ask for those things.
Yeah.
And if that's something that, hey, we can't, we're not gonna allow those along the eastern side, we're not gonna lose any sleep over it. But I think it's maybe not part of this process, but staff can obviously confirm that, but I think the bigger thing is we have to come back to you
Sure.
and ask that question.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think it's just really easy to awfulize, right? You know, it's like you come out of a place like Stapleton, you have this conning tower that's 3 stories tall,
Yes,
looking down
yes.
over a neighbor, right? And so I think it's easy to sort of like fear that.
Yep.
But the flip side is you may have a garage that has sort of a loft space that you don't even know.
Correct.
That it's a 1-bedroom unit or something like that. So
Right.
that's what we're trying to sort of mitigate. So I appreciate your answers on that.
Yeah.
Madam Vice Chair, if I may also, this neighborhood master plan process, right? And so at this level, it's still, this is kind of outlining the basics, right? But we'll still have to go through plating. And so, dealing with things like the alley width and, is there a buffer, is there not a buffer? Where do we place snow? Those are typical parts of our plating conversations so that we can identify all those specifics as we go through plating. The neighborhood master plan is to give you an overall framework and making a rezoning recommendation primarily. And then to inform plating moving forward. So we deal with those all typically as part of our plating process.
And by our talking about it tonight, we've sort of entered into the record.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's great to hear that feedback now because it just lets us know those are important issues that we need to make sure that we focus on and prioritize. Maybe beyond what we might do on a regular basis.
So on that, Chris, administratively, we could, I don't know if it's a condition, but if we were to approve the neighborhood master plan tonight, but we know that there's concerns about that eastern edge, I think we've included language in other neighborhood master plans where it's like staff will work to address stated concerns or something like that, just so that it's kind of like documented in the record.
I think that's perfectly appropriate, and then that way we can identify those as we come back in front of you with plating. And say, here's how we address the concerns that were brought up, in all the ways that we could,
I guess I do just have kind of a question about the HOA because there were some public comments about it's not quite an island, but it's gonna not be, I think, at least initially part of the existing neighborhood's HOA, but there is kind of in a way, a governance conflict. I mean, snow removal is a good point, or the property boundaries are a good point, so. And I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of the existing neighborhood, but I guess, how would that work to have, I guess an alleyway, like backyard to backyard being 2 different HOAs? Or is there a potential that the HOA, this property or this parcel could become part of the existing HOA? Cause there were also concerns in the public comment just expressed about, obviously folks are gonna be living close to the parks of the existing neighborhood and they're gonna use those parks, of course. I mean, just like they're gonna use the Pioneer Park that's nearby, which is a town park. So any comments you could provide or clarification on that would be.
What I could tell you about HOA side of it is worked with hundreds of developments and HOAs get set up all the time for the individual communities themselves to take care of the special needs of those communities. And so for a project like this, the neighbors to the east don't have a snow plowing requirement. We do. And so we probably charge a little more for that on a monthly basis than they do. And then, a lot of times it's tough to incorporate into other neighborhood associations just because of how they've been set up and all the paperwork that and the legal and administrative things that you have to go through. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't explore that, or if they were interested, we could do things like that. But I think the other key point is usually HOAs are working together next when they do have that common, just as you do as a town, when you abut other, towns, there's a line in the sand, right? But you work together, a lot of times on what happens, at that border. So HOAs, I've seen that experience in HOAs working together when they come up to common things like that. But it's also a little different here, I think, too, in that it's probably a separate HOA because it has a little more of a burden on snowplow removal and things like that, which is a benefit to them though too, right? They don't have to plow their driveways in the alley and so forth. They get that done for them, so.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions or comments at this point?
I don't, but do we want a conference for a second?
Yeah, we wanna discuss, I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, and I certainly support the suggestion to include language regarding the staff working with
Yeah, I
the
agree.
developers on the
On the eastern
side,
border,
yeah.
of whether yeah, I'm trying to think, wish I could probably pull up previous minutes of how it's worded exactly, but yeah, I think it could say something to the effect of, if we go through the approval, say with the condition that staff work with the developer and the existing neighbors to come up with a solution for the transition or screening along the eastern edge, including aesthetics and I guess maintenance or something to that effect. I don't.
You almost had the wording down there, I should read that.
Right, Courtney, well, I'm making it up on the fly.
Pretty good.
And I do, I agree with Chris, I think we are gonna have some other
Yeah.
times to be able to review some of these things, but I think it's probably good to put that in the motion so that staff, future staff, also knows,
Right.
what some of those concerns are as they're working with the developer and so as a reminder. But again, we're gonna have a plat, we're gonna have the conditional use permits, we're gonna have time to be, and other opportunities to resolve some of those issues, so.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the neighborhood master plan criteria, it does check the boxes, but there are some things that to document.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the I'm just kind of scanning the urban residential code, and I like how these codes are written because it allows some flexibility for the developer and for the builder, but it still provides a level of surety for the neighbor to go in there and say, okay, so I recognize that there is going to be X amount of landscaping and I get a sense of how the massing is gonna work and stuff. So I kind of like how it's set up because it sort of protects everybody for those future processes, and we don't have, I mean, they've been really responsive, and you sort of hope that as the process moves forward, this kind of dynamic precludes a potential fight,
And I will say that the current layout is, in my mind, a much more logical and workable layout than some of the other options we've seen in the past, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Agreed. Okay, so any more discussion, comments?
I don't think so, maybe just a check, so conditions would go on the first motion for the neighborhood master plan, and then that would obviously, and then we would still just do the rezoning afterwards.
Yep, I think that's appropriate, that the conditions be made with the neighborhood master plan approval.
right, they go to the planning rather than the zoning.
Well, then do we have a motion? I know it's a tough
Chris?
one.
I can try to restate what I said.
We'll try to
Give
have
me
you
at
Chris.
least 2 or 3 tries. Alright, so I'll motion to make a recommendation of approval for the Farmstead Acres Neighborhood Master Plan to the town board with the following condition. 1, that town staff work with the developer and adjacent property owners to develop an amenable solution for the eastern border, both considering screening, aesthetics, and maintenance such as snow removal.
Or Melissa, Michelle, did you get all of this?
I think Jonathan.
Jonathan got it?
Wow. He'll double check the
That's
recording
impressive.
too.
We
Yes,
also have
to-
recording too to go back on,
I was gonna
so.
say,
Yeah.
that was a long one, I was gonna say, if I were the secretary,
It is,
It was well
good.
stated, yeah, thank you.
I'll second.
Alright, we have a motion and a second.
Can I point of order, just super quick in the wording? I thought I heard that you had 2 conditions. Did I mishear that?
I just have 1 condition.
Okay, alright, cool. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that was still looming that we hadn't
The
documented.
way it's the way it's written, like they always number them, so maybe that's.
I just thought I heard you say there with 2 conditions. I thought I heard 2 conditions. I wanted to make sure we didn't.
You did say
sort of
1.
put in
Yeah.
Alright, no, that's cool.
This condition encompassed everything you guys have.
Yeah,
Perfect. Just wanted to check.
it was an efficient condition.
Yes.
Excellent job.
Number one.
Alright,
Michelle, can we take the roll?
Okay, Commissioner Van Bethel,
Yes.
Commissioner Ween,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Kurtz.
yes.
Unanimous vote. Thank you again, we appreciate all the hard work that you went through after our comments last October, so we appreciate that. We look forward to working with you further on some of this.
Thank you. And thanks to the neighbors too for sticking with it and for
Yes.
being sort of like understanding of what we're trying to get to, and we appreciate you kind of coming in and talking and helping us work through stuff, so.
It's a collaboration, so thanks for that.
Did we make the rezoning recommendations?
We did not, so we should do that.
Sorry, I missed that.
It's the second.
The second.
We need to do that one
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Yes, we do.
Do we have a motion?
Alright, so I'll move to make a recommendation of approval of the Farmstead Acres rezoning to the town board with the following condition. The rezoning will be adopted only upon approval of the neighborhood master plan. Second.
So we have a second, we have a motion and a second. Please take the roll. We do have a motion and a second?
Michelle was asking who made the second.
Oh,
Oh, okay, Brett.
sorry about that.
Commissioner Van Bethlen,
Yes.
Commissioner Wing,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
and Commissioner Kurtz.
Yes.
With that, we have a unanimous vote, and that measure passes as well. Great. So that leads us to our next item on the agenda. Again, thank you to the neighbors, thanks again to our applicant here for all your hard work, so. Okay. Planning Commission reports, or anything that needs to be reported?
Madam Vice Chair, if I could, I've already mentioned to you, but we did hire a new community development director. Well, I say that, let me caveat that with, we've extended a conditional offer pending a background check. That offer has been accepted, and so we'll go through all the details of that. I think I mentioned to some of you privately who that is. I'm happy to share that with you privately as well, but rather than announce it publicly, until all that paperwork is done, I'll just let you know that I hope and expect that at your next meeting, we'll be introducing our new community development director.
Great. I guess, quick question, are we going to have a February 23rd?
We do have items that we are targeting for February 23rd.
February 23rd meeting, okay. So, wonderful. Hopefully it's appropriate for us to extend our thanks to Baseline for stepping in. I know probably quick work to fill in there, and we do appreciate you being able to do that as well. And I wanna thank you, Chris, Michelle, Jonathan. I know it's probably been very interesting stepping in and doing double duty here, so personally, and I think I can speak for my fellow commissioners and thank you for your extra hard work and right before the holidays too, so get that double whammy. So
Thank you.
thanks all of you, to all of you. Okay, anything else that we need to know before our February 23rd meeting?
I just have a question, again,
Good.
as you sit on, as you're new to something like this, some of you that have done it for years or decades, whatever, have accumulated this vast knowledge. And there's acronyms that are used, and if you've never really been part of this, there's a lot of things out there and they just don't tie out. So here's an example. So PUD, right, it seems like there's nothing talked about more, and it's planned unit development, and then how does that piece, because I kept hearing that tonight, how does that overlay with zoning? There's R1 zoning, R2 zoning, all the other zonings, the two.
Yeah.
It
I can answer that. I think.
yeah.
PUD is its own zoning designation. So it's not R1 or R2 or C1 or C2. Those are zoning designations, but so is PUD. Our code doesn't include the PUD zoning designation anymore, but PUDs were basically used, PUDs allowed an applicant to set their own terms for that development that were independent of our code. So they might have different setbacks, they might include architectural requirements or landscape requirements. It gives a developer a little more control over how that project develops independent of the other zoning designations, right? So if our R1, R2, R3, C1, C2, if our traditional zoning designations don't work for the type of project they're trying to build, then they could have previously come in and got a PUD approved. The PUD process also gave the planning commission and the town board dramatically more control over how that project developed. I think we tease Heron Lakes, but that's a large PUD. I think they went through 67 public meetings before or they've been through over the course of that project, 67 public meetings. And that becomes incredibly unwieldy as well, but it also, I don't wanna wax too poetic here, but it also, I think, creates a situation where it's more difficult to plan for the future. When we have our standard zoning designations and we expect you to abide by those, then we have a pretty good idea of what's gonna occur in the future. PUDs are a little bit more, previously had been much more flexible. And so, there are some PUDs in town that are approved where their list of land uses is basically anything imaginable, right? And so you have no idea.
And that supersedes any zoning.
It
So-
does,
So at some point in
that is
time-
their zoning designation.
Okay,
So
at
it
some
doesn't
point in time, a
supersede zoning, it is
developer,
their zoning.
owner, somebody came to the town and got approval, and at that time, they said, here's what I'd like to use this land for.
Correct,
This is my PUD, and is officially documented somewhere,
correct.
and so they could do that, and so that, again, supersedes the zoning around that, it would take precedent over that.
It is their zoning.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And it was very popular back in the eighties, extremely popular back in the eighties too, and was a way to try to incentivize certain types of development. So, and I remember that, and I remember when I was in school, I studied real estate law, I took a few courses especially in that, and we studied a lot of cases having to do with PUDs, because as they were starting to develop, there was a lot of legal issues with them. And you don't see that as popular now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, just because most cities don't want to lose control or not be able to see that vision for the future, and so, they're not as prevalent now because
Sure.
of that.
And I think what you're starting to see now, we've certainly adopted this approach. I think it's becoming more popular, but our kind of more form-based requirements. And so it's a lot more about what's the kind of place you're trying to create than the ultimate land uses, because land uses change over time, right?
Sure.
With the exception of kind of very traditional single-family residential neighborhoods. And so, I think it's normal to kind of go up and down through these different processes over time. But at least certainly in Berthoud, PUDs they're no longer in vogue for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is they don't exist in our code anymore. You can't do them anymore, you can't ask for a PUD anymore.
Yeah, and most folks who come to develop a property that was a PUD, at least in my assessment, are asking for a conversion. First.
Yeah, and
Away
we-
from the PUD, they wanna get rezoned, and then they wanna go through the process.
And to be honest, one of the main reasons for that
Yeah.
is both, we think it's better for the community, because then when they rezone to a traditional zoning designation or a more traditional zoning designation, then we know what it is that they're gonna build in the future. At least we have a much more specific idea. I mean, there's still flexibility within the zoning code, right? But it also gives them more clarity, because in the PUD process, when they had to come back in front of the board for almost every decision they wanted to make, including site planning, it got to be really heavy-handed where, they're like literally saying, I don't like where you put this tree, or, I don't really like the color of your siding, and that can be a really, really challenging process for a developer who gets frustrated through that. So it's easier to just say, I'm gonna zone to one of your zoning designations and I'm gonna follow your code. And that gives us clarity, it gives them clarity.
So with Huron Lakes being a relatively new community, why was that given a PUD then?
That actually, so almost all of the developments underway right now, like Vantage, Heron Lakes, Prairie Star, a lot of those projects were approved 15 or more years ago. So they didn't really take off until the last 5 to 7 years. But a lot of those projects had existing approvals decades ago. And then for some political reasons in town, market and economic reasons, those projects didn't occur. So all of the new projects that are coming in, they're all zoned to one of our traditional zoning designations in the code. But we do have a few PUD holdovers that were approved years and years and years ago. Like Ludlow Farm is a PUD, it was approved decades ago. It's hyper flexible, but the developer is coming in now and will be asking to rezone to a new, to our current zoning designations.
There was one other thing I thought I read in here, and maybe I misread it or it wasn't applicable, but I thought it said this has a septic. And I would have thought this would have been on city water,
This will absolutely be on city water and sewer.
City sewer, right.
Now, I honestly don't know the answer to this question, maybe Will knows if the industrial area that's already there might be on septic. But
I do not.
But all the new development will be required to connect to city utilities.
I made a note of it and highlighted it, so, okay.
Yeah.
Alright. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Questions?
So moved.
Alright, we're adjourned. That is a non-secondable motion.
Adjourned. There you go, done.
Hey, I know my Robert's rules.
Hey, good job, Ken.